In November 1979, the world watched as one of the most dramatic international crises of the Cold War suddenly unfolded inside the American embassy in Tehran, Iran. What began as political unrest during the Iranian Revolution quickly transformed into a hostage crisis that would shock the United States and dominate global headlines for more than a year. At the center of the crisis was a country undergoing massive change. For decades, Iran had been ruled by Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a powerful monarch closely allied with the United States. American governments supported the Shah politically and militarily, viewing Iran as an important strategic partner in the Middle East during the Cold War. But inside Iran, anger toward the Shah had been growing for years. Many Iranians accused his government of corruption, political repression, and excessive dependence on Western influence. Demonstrations spread across the country while revolutionary movements gained momentum against the monarchy. By 1979, the situation exploded into full-scale revolution. The Shah eventually fled Iran as the old government collapsed. In his place emerged a new Islamic government led by Ruhollah Khomeini. Anti-American sentiment intensified rapidly as revolutionary supporters viewed the United States as a symbol of foreign interference in Iranian affairs. Encyclopedia Britannica. The atmosphere inside Tehran became increasingly volatile. Crowds gathered outside the American embassy chanting anti-US slogans while tensions between Iran and the United States worsened. Then, in November 1979, the crisis reached a breaking point. Thousands of Iranian militants and student protesters stormed the American embassy compound in Tehran. The attack overwhelmed embassy security as armed protesters flooded through the gates and seized the building. American diplomats and embassy staff scrambled for safety while chaos spread through the compound. Some attempted to destroy classified documents while others hid inside offices and secure rooms. Within hours, dozens of Americans had been taken hostage. Encyclopedia Britannica. Images from the embassy shocked audiences around the world. Blindfolded American hostages appeared on television screens while armed captors guarded the compound. The hostage-takers demanded that the United States return the former Shah to Iran, where revolutionary leaders wanted him prosecuted. For the United States, the crisis became a national humiliation. The American embassy represented U.S. power and diplomacy abroad, yet now American citizens were trapped inside a hostile foreign capital while the world watched. Public anger and fear spread rapidly across the United States as families waited desperately for news about the hostages. Inside the White House, pressure mounted on President Jimmy Carter. Encyclopedia Britannica. The administration initially pursued diplomatic solutions. Negotiators worked through international channels while economic sanctions targeted Iran. Billions of dollars in Iranian assets were frozen, and the United States attempted to isolate Iran politically on the world stage. But despite months of negotiations, the crisis continued. Some hostages were eventually released, but more than 50 Americans remained trapped in captivity. Day after day, television networks broadcast updates about the crisis while public frustration grew inside the United States. The longer the hostages remained imprisoned, the weaker the American government appeared in the eyes of many citizens. For President Carter, the crisis became deeply personal. Every failed negotiation increased political pressure on his administration. Critics accused the government of weakness while demands for stronger action intensified. The hostage crisis dominated headlines, shaping public opinion and becoming one of the defining events of Carter's presidency. Meanwhile, inside Iran, the hostages were moved between locations under armed guard. American intelligence agencies struggled to gather accurate information about their exact conditions and whereabouts. Revolutionary chaos inside Iran made intelligence collection extremely difficult, leaving the United States with limited options. As diplomatic efforts stalled, military planners began quietly preparing for something far more dangerous. Inside the Pentagon and intelligence community, discussions focused on the possibility of a rescue mission deep inside hostile Iranian territory. The operation would require extraordinary precision. American forces would need to secretly enter Iran, travel hundreds of miles across enemy territory, rescue the hostages from Tehran, and escape safely before Iranian forces could respond. The risks were enormous. Failure could lead to the deaths of hostages, American soldiers, and civilians while triggering an international disaster between the United States and revolutionary Iran. Yet as weeks turned into months, pressure to act continued growing. Eventually, American leaders made a decision. A highly secret military operation was approved to rescue the hostages by force. Elite special operations units, helicopter crews, transport aircraft, and intelligence personnel began training for one of the most ambitious rescue missions in American history. The operation would become known as Operation Eagle Claw. Encyclopedia Britannica. It was a mission built on secrecy, speed, and precision. But hidden beneath the detailed planning was a terrifying reality. The entire operation depended on countless moving parts working perfectly in one of the most hostile environments imaginable. And soon, American forces would enter the Iranian desert on a mission that would either restore national pride or end in disaster. As Operation Eagle Claw moved from planning to execution, American military forces prepared for one of the most ambitious and dangerous rescue missions ever attempted. The objective seemed almost impossible: secretly enter revolutionary Iran, rescue dozens of American hostages held in Tehran, and escape before Iranian forces could stop them. The operation required extraordinary coordination. Unlike traditional military assaults, Eagle Claw depended on multiple aircraft, helicopters, special operations units, and support teams operating together with precise timing across hundreds of miles of hostile territory. Every stage of the mission relied on the previous step succeeding perfectly. If even one major part failed, the entire operation could collapse. The rescue force included some of America's most elite military personnel. Members of Delta Force were selected to carry out the hostage rescue itself. Specially trained Air Force crews operated transport aircraft, while Navy helicopter pilots prepared to fly deep into Iran under cover of darkness. Rangers and support personnel were also assigned critical roles throughout the mission. The plan itself was incredibly complex. First, transport aircraft carrying troops and equipment would secretly fly into a remote desert location inside Iran known as Desert 1. At the same time, helicopters launched from an aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea would fly hundreds of miles across the desert to meet the transport planes. Once both groups linked together, the rescue force would refuel, reorganize, and continue toward Tehran. The following night, Delta Force operators planned to enter the city, attack the embassy compound, free the hostages, and transport everyone to a nearby airfield where larger aircraft would evacuate them from Iran. It was an operation built entirely around speed, surprise, and secrecy. But from the very beginning, problems began appearing. On the night of April 24, 1980, the mission officially started. Massive C-130 transport aircraft carrying troops and equipment crossed into Iranian airspace, flying at low altitude to avoid radar detection. Inside the aircraft, soldiers sat silently in darkness, knowing they were entering hostile territory far from help. Meanwhile, helicopters lifted off from the aircraft carrier and headed toward Iran across hundreds of miles of open desert. The crews immediately faced dangerous conditions. As the helicopters moved deeper into Iran, they encountered massive dust storms known as haboobs. Thick clouds of sand swallowed visibility almost completely while powerful winds battered the aircraft. Pilots struggled to navigate through darkness and dust while maintaining formation. Inside the helicopters, tension rose rapidly. The storms reduced visibility to near zero in some areas, forcing crews to rely heavily on instruments while flying through dangerous conditions. Sand filled engines and mechanical systems while the exhausting flight continued across the desert. Then the first major problem occurred. One helicopter suffered mechanical failure and was forced to turn back before reaching the staging area. Another developed serious technical issues during the journey. Suddenly, the carefully balanced mission was already losing critical aircraft before the rescue phase had even begun. Despite these setbacks, the remaining aircraft continued toward Desert 1. Hours later, the transport planes successfully landed at the remote desert site. Under cover of darkness, troops unloaded equipment and secured the area while waiting anxiously for the helicopters to arrive. The desert environment itself created constant uncertainty. Wind whipped through the staging area while darkness covered the landscape. Communication difficulties complicated coordination between aircraft and ground personnel. Everyone understood the mission timeline was already slipping behind schedule. Then something unexpected happened. A civilian bus suddenly appeared moving across the remote desert road near Desert 1. American forces quickly stopped the vehicle and detained the passengers to prevent the mission from being exposed. Not long afterward, a fuel truck also approached the area, creating even more confusion and tension. The secret staging zone was no longer as isolated as planners had expected. As time passed, more helicopters finally reached Desert 1, but the situation continued deteriorating. Another helicopter was declared inoperable due to mechanical problems. This created a critical issue for mission commanders. The operation required a minimum number of functioning helicopters to continue safely, and now there were too few aircraft available to complete the rescue plan. Inside the desert staging area, commanders faced an impossible decision. Continue the mission with insufficient helicopters and risk catastrophic failure inside Tehran? Or abort the operation after already penetrating deep into Iranian territory? Pressure mounted rapidly. Troops waited beside aircraft under extreme exhaustion while commanders discussed options in the middle of the desert night. The mission had been designed around precise coordination and timing, yet mechanical failures, weather conditions, and delays had thrown the entire operation into uncertainty. Eventually the decision was made. Operation Eagle Claw would be aborted. The rescue force would withdraw from Iran before the situation became even more dangerous. But although the hostage rescue had been cancelled, the most tragic moment of the mission was still ahead. Because in the darkness of Desert 1, amid exhaustion, confusion, blowing sand, and stressed crews preparing for evacuation, disaster was about to strike. By the time mission commanders decided to abort Operation Eagle Claw, the atmosphere at Desert 1 had become tense and chaotic. The rescue plan was already falling apart under the weight of mechanical failures, sandstorms, delays, and exhaustion. What had once seemed like a carefully coordinated operation was now a dangerous emergency evacuation deep inside hostile Iranian territory. The most critical problem was the helicopters. The mission required a minimum number of operational aircraft to continue safely toward Tehran and evacuate the hostages. But after multiple mechanical failures during the flight across the desert, there were simply not enough helicopters remaining. Commanders faced a painful reality. Continuing the operation could trap American forces deep inside Iran without enough aircraft to complete the rescue or escape successfully. The risk of disaster had become too high. After consulting military leaders, the decision was made to cancel the mission and withdraw immediately. For the exhausted troops gathered in the desert, the news was devastating. Months of preparation, secrecy, and training had led to this moment, yet the rescue mission was ending before reaching Tehran. Soldiers and crews quickly began reorganizing for evacuation while aircraft prepared to depart Desert 1 as fast as possible. But the conditions around the staging area remained extremely dangerous. Darkness covered the desert while powerful winds continued blowing sand through the air. Visibility remained poor, and confusion spread among crews trying to coordinate multiple aircraft movements in a cramped and stressful environment. Then disaster struck. As helicopters repositioned near the transport aircraft, one of the helicopters suddenly collided with a parked C-130 transport plane loaded with fuel. The impact triggered a massive explosion. Within seconds, a huge fireball erupted across the desert night. Flames consumed both aircraft as burning fuel exploded violently around the staging area. The blast lit up the darkness while smoke and debris spread across Desert 1. Inside the burning aircraft, American servicemen were trapped. The explosion and fire killed 8 U.S. military personnel almost instantly. Others nearby scrambled desperately to escape the flames as ammunition and fuel continued exploding around the wreckage. The scene became total chaos. Troops ran through smoke and burning debris while commanders struggled to regain control of the situation. The failed rescue mission had suddenly transformed into a deadly disaster far worse than anyone had imagined. There was no time to recover the destroyed equipment or fully secure the area. Fearing that Iranian forces could arrive at any moment, surviving personnel prepared for immediate evacuation. Remaining aircraft loaded troops as quickly as possible while the desert fire continued burning behind them. In the confusion and urgency, several helicopters were abandoned at Desert 1. Sensitive equipment, classified materials, and damaged aircraft remained scattered across the desert staging site. The surviving American forces lifted off and escaped Iran, leaving behind wreckage that would soon reveal the operation to the world. As dawn approached, Iranian authorities discovered the abandoned site. Burned aircraft, destroyed equipment, and the remains of the failed operation lay exposed across the desert. News of the disaster spread rapidly through international media, shocking audiences around the globe. For the United States, the humiliation was enormous. Operation Eagle Claw had been intended to rescue American hostages and restore national confidence during one of the country's most painful international crises. Instead, the mission ended in tragedy, mechanical failure, and public embarrassment. Television networks broadcast images of the burned aircraft wreckage while reports described the deaths of American servicemen inside the Iranian desert. Critics questioned how such a highly planned operation could collapse so dramatically before even reaching its main objective. Inside the White House, the political consequences were immediate. President Jimmy Carter publicly accepted responsibility for the failed mission. The disaster intensified criticism of his administration and deepened the perception that the United States had suffered a major international humiliation during the hostage crisis. Meanwhile, the American hostages remained in captivity. The rescue mission had failed to free a single hostage, while the operation itself exposed weaknesses in military coordination, planning, and communication between different branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. Military investigators later identified numerous problems. The mission involved complicated coordination between helicopters, transport aircraft, special forces, intelligence units, and support crews that had rarely trained together on operations of this scale. Mechanical reliability issues, communication problems, weather conditions, and unclear command structures all contributed to the disaster. Yet despite the failure, many military leaders recognized something important. The servicemen involved had shown extraordinary courage under impossible conditions. Pilots flew through dangerous sandstorms deep inside hostile territory. Special operations troops prepared to risk their lives attempting to rescue the hostages. Even during the chaos at Desert One, surviving personnel worked desperately to save others and evacuate the area. The tragedy shocked the American military establishment. Operation Eagle Claw exposed serious weaknesses in how the United States planned and coordinated complex special operations missions. The failure demonstrated that modern rescue operations required far greater integration between military branches, better training, and more advanced command structures. In many ways, the disaster at Desert One became a turning point. What happened in the Iranian desert would eventually lead to major reforms inside the U.S. military. The failure of Operation Eagle Claw sent shockwaves throughout the United States military and political establishment. What had begun as a secret rescue mission intended to restore national pride instead became one of the most painful military disasters in modern American history. For many Americans, the images from Desert One were unforgettable. Burned aircraft sitting in the Iranian desert became symbols of humiliation and failure during a time when the United States already appeared weakened by the ongoing hostage crisis. News coverage intensified public frustration while political critics questioned how such a complex operation had gone so wrong. The disaster placed enormous pressure on President Jimmy Carter. Although Carter accepted responsibility for authorizing the mission, the failed operation damaged public confidence in his leadership during an already difficult election year. Many historians later argued that the hostage crisis and Operation Eagle Claw significantly weakened Carter's presidency and influenced the outcome of the 1980 U.S. presidential election. But beyond politics, the mission exposed serious structural problems inside the American military itself. Investigations launched after the operation revealed major weaknesses in coordination between different branches of the armed forces. Helicopter crews, Air Force pilots, special operations teams, and support units often operated under separate command structures with limited experience working together on missions this complicated. Communication systems struggled under battlefield conditions. Different branches used equipment and procedures that were not always fully compatible. Mechanical reliability issues, weather forecasting failures, and logistical confusion created layers of problems that multiplied once the operation entered hostile territory. Military leaders realized something important. The United States possessed highly trained soldiers, advanced equipment, and enormous resources, but it lacked a unified system for conducting large-scale joint special operations missions. Operation Eagle Claw became a painful lesson in the importance of coordination. In the years that followed, the U.S. military began implementing major reforms designed to prevent another disaster like Desert One. Training between different military branches increased dramatically while command structures were reorganized to improve communication and operational efficiency. Special operations forces received greater attention and investment. Elite units such as Delta Force gained expanded roles in counterterrorism and hostage rescue missions. Military planners studied every detail of Eagle Claw, searching for ways to improve planning, logistics, intelligence coordination, and rapid response capabilities. Eventually, the lessons learned from the failed mission helped shape the future of American special operations warfare. The U.S. military later established stronger joint command systems and expanded specialized units capable of conducting high-risk missions around the world. These reforms contributed to the creation of modern counterterrorism structures and highly coordinated special operations commands used in future conflicts. In many ways, Operation Eagle Claw became the foundation for future success. Military operations carried out years later, including complex hostage rescues, counterterrorism raids, and covert special operations missions, benefited directly from lessons learned during the failure in Iran. The tragedy forced the military to evolve. At the same time, The mission also left a lasting emotional impact on the families of the servicemen who died at Desert One. The 8 Americans killed during the operation became remembered not for failure, but for their willingness to risk their lives attempting to rescue fellow citizens trapped in captivity. Their sacrifice became an important part of the mission's legacy. Inside military circles, Operation Eagle Claw is still studied extensively today. Officers and strategists examine the operation to understand how leadership decisions, coordination problems, weather conditions, logistics, and mechanical failures can affect even the most carefully planned missions. The operation demonstrated a harsh reality of special warfare. Even elite forces can fail when complexity, timing, and unpredictable conditions collide. Yet despite the disaster, Operation Eagle Claw also highlighted the extraordinary bravery required for such missions. The servicemen involved knowingly entered hostile territory with enormous risks and little margin for error. Their willingness to carry out the mission reflected the dangerous responsibilities placed upon special operations forces during international crises. Over time, the hostage crisis itself finally came to an end. After 444 days in captivity, the American hostages were eventually released in January 1981 following lengthy negotiations. But by then, the damage caused by the crisis, and the failed rescue mission, had already reshaped American politics, military strategy, and public perception. Today, Operation Eagle Claw remains one of the most dramatic failed rescue missions in modern history. It is remembered as a story of courage, pressure, chaos, and tragedy inside the deserts of Iran. More importantly, it became a turning point that transformed how the United States planned and executed special operations missions in the decades that followed. The mission failed in its objective. But from the flames of Desert One emerged a new era of American military reform, elite special operations, and modern counterterrorism warfare. And because of that, Operation Eagle Claw would never simply be remembered as a disaster. It would be remembered as the painful lesson that changed the future of U.S. special operations forever.